This is the Bizgnus Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
Our guest is Joel Malkoff, who's a writer and a coach on ethical business practices and principles. He's written a modern-day parable about ethical business decision-making. Joel, welcome to Bizgnus. Why a parable? Aren't there enough in the Bible already?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Doug. I truly appreciate it. Parables are interesting. Many times in business, they're writing fables where business people will, have mice running around a maze or penguins and just a whole good deal of animals trying to get a message across. And sometimes the fables are, in business books, sometimes a little light. So the message is really very shallowly camouflaged through the fable, and it becomes something you don't really internalize. So I didn't want to use things like sidebars and captions and things like that. I wrote as a parable, which in essence, from a religious point of view, a parable has a certain connotation to it. But from my point of view, the parable is a business story. There is a religious spirituality to it, but it's low key and it's not the principle of the book. So what I wanted to do was to get a message across to fellow business people, sales and marketing in particular, about being ethical in business, going beyond the letter of the law, the spirit of the law from an ethical point of view, not just being honest. I found when I read stories like that, if the story was engaging, I would internalize it. So that was the purpose of the parable. One of the books I read when I graduated college, Pace University in New York in '73, was The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Magdillo. And it was a classic book, and it was written as a parable. It did have a religious aspect to it towards the end, but I got it. And it kind of made a difference.
Now, your book is coming out at a time when ethical conduct is certainly being deeply debated, putting it mildly, in this country.
Yes.
If you were able to go up to the top political leaders in the country and hand them a copy of your book, what would you say to them to get them to read it? Why should they read it?
Well, that's interesting. My book is focused, great question. My book is focused on sales and marketing. So I took less of a direction to things like inside trading, embezzlement, all the many, many things that, especially at the high level, are ethical / unethical. But if we take the approach of the highest person in office or heavyweight CEOs, and we look at everyone as being a salesperson, a marketeer, an advertiser, someone that needs to get a message across, then my book can parallel that. Because what the book is saying is, one, if you provide full disclosure, you will have increased business long-term. You'll forsake short-term gain for long-term gain. You'll have a repeat business, you have referrals. So if I went to take that principle, as I would tell a salesperson, look to the future, or a marketeer, or somebody advertising, could I tell the person politically that in essence, he has that same goal, provide full disclosure, make sure your voting base or the people that you work with feels comfortable with you. There's a degree of trust. And through that, you'll get people to buy in on your ideas. So in essence, more customers and more referrals. So I would probably use a sales and marketing mode and apply it to politicians that literally, as everyone sells, but Clearly a politician does that.
Joel, tell our listeners a little bit about your background. How did you get to this point in time?
Well, interestingly, in '73, when I graduated from Pace University in New York, I grew up as kind of a street smart kid in Brooklyn, New York. Worked my way into college, and when I graduated, I had Ivy League notions of what business was like from getting a business degree in Manhattan. But it was the energy crunch in '73, so I couldn't work for a large company. I wound up taking a position in the car industry. And I learned through hard knocks how to sell. Unfortunately, how to sell from a manipulative point of view. Bait and switch, bundling things into leases. It was an unethical industry, and much better now, of course. But there's this unethicalness of it. And from there, I wound up actually operating a used car lot. So I kind of went from the pot into the fire. After I had a number of years, 5 years in the car industry, I went into commercial lighting. I figured that would be a good deal better. But I found out there was only principally 3 companies handling lighting today. And there was collusion, all the prices were the same. And I found dealing with distributors and credit claims and many other things, it was different, but there was an ethical stain in it. And from there, I broke into the medical industry. So I figured from a medical point of view, I'm dealing with doctors, I'm dealing with pharmaceuticals, I'm dealing with medical distributors. I'm selling products that save lives. What could be better? Well, lo and behold, the industry is filled with products that are being used for reimbursement as opposed to just good medical care, honorariums. There's just a lot of things going on in the medical world. So after that exposure, I started my own company in medical distribution, and through some rather unethical activities, I wound up in trouble. And through that, I wound up having an epiphany. And the epiphany, which is written in my book, is how I turned around my unethical behavior to ethical. So what the book in essence is about is my life. So it starts, as I told you, I wind up actually going into heavenly court. And the first question is, were you ethical in business? So there's an angelic trial. And I kind of go back in time, visit the places of my past, almost like It's a Wonderful Life or Christmas Carol. And then I'm judged going back and forth to heaven, bringing me right up to where I am today as a general manager of a medical company. So the parallel does have fictitious names, and it does have some of the companies tossed around a little, but to protect the innocent. So, but it is the story of my life, and it is where I am now.
Well, a lot of used car companies, not the gigantic national ones by any means, but certainly the ones you see around town are mom and pops for all
Yes.
practical purposes. So how do you apply in this dog-eat-dog economy that we're in thanks to COVID-19 and who knows what else? How do you apply ethical selling to a place that needs to sell that 57 Plymouth to pay the light bill?
Yeah, I mean, the person surely can. The goal is to look at your business in a long term. Don't look at a one shot. When I got into the car industry, it was a one shot for me. You make the sale, or the person walks out the door, and you don't expect the be back, as they would call it. But when I got into other industries like lighting, you were dealing with the same people over and over again. They were distributors. So you had to really understand the big picture, and you were building relationships. And the only way really to build relationships is over a long period of time. So you do have a couple of people in the car industry that became extremely well known since passing on, but people like Joe Gareldi. I mean, these were people that were selling thousands of cars a year. So you say, how did they do that? So they did all the basic things. They made sure they spoke to people properly, kept good records, did the follow-up, thanked people for birthdays, anniversaries, joined a closeness. But the key was they provided full disclosure. And the best way really to do that is to speak to someone, and you can see they may have an interest in, let's say, a car, and you're literally telling them all the things why this car could be problematic. After the person overcomes the shock of you being honest, you built a rapport, and through that rapport, you gain trust. So maybe you don't have a car on that lot, you could sell that person right now, but you're going to know what the person wants, and you can start looking around for it. And the person understands that you're not just trying to sell whatever you have. So that would be the lesson to that used car lot. It would be build a referral business, build repeat business, provide full disclosure. That doesn't mean, Doug, that you have to put everything up front. When you sell something, the idea is to be persuasive. So you have to do full disclosure. So example, if you're selling a car and has a bad transmission, you need to let that person know right away. But if the person if the car has some scratches on the rear quarter, you don't have to stand there and point it out. The person can see that. Now, you do at the end of your sales pitch need to disclose everything, but you really don't need to shoot yourself in the foot when you're trying to present something. So there's a degree of salesmanship, which is more of an art than a science, how you disclose things. So you need to do full disclosure, and you need to point out the major defects initially, but some things you don't need to point out right away.
Your next book ought to be about the used car industry, I suspect.
Yes.
Now tell our listeners and viewers, what is the name of the current book?
The current book is Selling Ethically. And it's a business parable about how to make profits by being ethical. So I think the key really from a business point of view is the business person says, what's in it for me? Which is what every salesperson needs to ask all the time to the customers, what's in it for me? So to not to be preachy and to say, hey, you need to be ethical, you need to have goodness along with just the letter of the law, observe the spirit of the law, it still becomes to the business person, what's in it for me? So what's in it for me is more profit. You will achieve more profit by looking at the big picture, not short term, getting referrals, doing repeat business. It's less expensive to advertise to your existing base as opposed to trying to find new people. It's just more profitable. So the underlying premise is you should be ethical because you should be ethical. But from a business point of view, why? And right now, most business people look at ethics as a necessary expense rather than a profit. So I need to be ethical because if something goes wrong in my company, I want to at least have a base of integrity so people won't jump on me all the time. I need to be ethical if something bad happens, like a recall, I can deal with it. I need to be ethical because if my product's a commodity, then my product versus another product, if it's priced the same, I may not get the sale. If I'm priced more, I won't get the sale. If I come from an ethical company where people say, hey, this company has ethics, if the price is similar, then they'll buy my product. If it's a little bit more, they'll buy my product. If it's much more, they won't buy my product. So why you want to be ethical and why people need to be ethical is to understand that it does provide good business for you. Now, the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, some of our business godfathers like Milton Friedman says, your prime responsibility as a business leader is to provide profit to the shareholder. So that concept alone defies the art of being righteous and being ethical. So there's a turnaround that's needed too. So ethics becomes a luxury to many companies, but kind of a necessity and a required expense. And you have a whole fleet of attorneys that are saying you have to do the letter of the law. So if you're saying, no, you have to do the spirit of the law, Your intent has to be good. You have to try to be fair and righteous. What you may find an attorney saying is you're going to leave yourself up for possible liability going beyond the letter of the law. Go right up to the letter of the law, but don't go beyond it. So the very rules of law can actually hurt you. And some companies have chief ethical officers, but primarily those people are lawyers. So there's a difficulty there. What I'm really looking to is to attract corporations that have large sales forces, pharmaceutical companies, real estate franchises, and get that CEO that already has been trying to get his company on the right path, and let them buy several thousand books and distribute it to their sales force. So that's the goal. It's altruistic. I'm right now making a very good living running a company. I'm spending a good deal of money on this book, but I'm really not looking to make money per se. I'm looking to cover my costs and spread ethics. It took 8 years to write the book. I've been writing on nights, weekends. So it's a long process, but it's a mission, a purpose. That's my goal.
What's been the reaction to your whole philosophy when you talk to other business people? Do they say, Joel, get out of here? Or Joel, tell me more? Or something in between?
Everyone had read the book, got the book. I'm involved with social media and PR to try to do interviews like I'm doing right now. So that's the spreading of the word. But it's difficult to spread the word because myself not having a platform and the people that will interview me, it isn't, Oprah, so I'm not exposed to millions and millions of people. So my exposure is very limited. So getting some book reviews, being on Amazon, I'm in the process of launching the audio book. I just finished with a very good actor. I have an ebook, I have a hardcover book, I have a soft-covered book. So it's really getting myself known out there through social media, through PR. It's an uphill battle. There's a lot of noise out there. So from an exposure point of view, it's been limited. So the people that have read my book, several dozen people, they got it, they liked it. But I need hundreds of people to do it. So starting next month, I'm going on a gifting sales strategy. So again, my background is sales. So I'm kind of stepping away from the marketing, social media, PR. I still have to do it, kind of a necessary evil, but I'm going into a sales strategy mode. So I have identified the ethical thought leaders and the CEOs of different corporations that have an ethical presence and ethical desire. So I'm going to be reaching out to them one-on-one and say, here's my book, read it. If you like it, spread the word. So that's my next stage. The book was launched in October. So it really hasn't been, it's been 4 months.
And Joel, what would you like to add that we haven't had a chance to talk about? You've been very good with all of your answers and taken them far beyond my questions.
Well, from my point of view, I would like you and I and everyone else in the world to be able to go somewhere and buy something and have it be let the seller beware, not let the buyer beware. That's what I would feel best. The marketplace would be filled with salespeople, advertising, anybody selling anything, companies online, direct. They would have a presence in mind not to hurt the buyer. Full disclosure, honesty, integrity, and the buyer would feel this comfortableness that he's dealing with a person that has ethics and has a high integrity. And then there would be trust in the marketplace. And that's my goal. My goal is for people just to trust people. Do it because you're God-fearing. Do it because it's the right thing to do it. Do it because you just want your fellow person to have a good experience and feel the trust. Kind of I guess in 73, I still have a bit of my peacenik in me. So it's, peace in the world, just everyone being honest and having a high degree of integrity. That's that would be my final goal.
You've been watching the Biz News Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. Thanks for watching.